Paul has over 35 years of financial services and payments experience. He's been the chair of NPP since its inception, I think, and he now has a new CEO, Adrian Loveney, and they're making great progress. So without further ado, please welcome Paul to the stage.
Thanks very much, Jane. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. I am going to resist the temptation in true Anzac spirit to talk about rugby, although you're still in a better place than we are. I will tell you, however, that my surname does have some Irish forebears, so I did have a little bit of pleasure at that game at Soldiers Field in Chicago last week. I was here 2 years ago, and I'm delighted to be invited back to speak to you again about NPP. What an original name, NPP, New Payments Platform. And yet I can't come up with anything that's better than that, because that's exactly what it is. It is new, it is a payments, and you've heard pretty consistently in the last few days about the power of platforms. I'm really interested in what you're doing over here. Jane, I'm an avid reader of your Friday newsletter. I get it sort of mid-afternoon on Friday, and I make sure that I always keep up with it. I would also encourage you to ask me any questions that you would like to. So what is my objective today? The bill of fare is pretty simple. I'm a simple guy, I like to keep things pretty simple. So firstly, I'm going to tell you what we're doing. I'm then going to explain why we're doing it. Then I want to talk about what we've done, a little about where we are in our program. I'd then like to talk a little bit about some of the, I won't call them hygiene factors, but some of the underpinning issues that are important in where we are today. And then last but not least, try and give you a fairly honest review about what we've learned so far, which may be of value to you. There's no right or wrong. There's no imperative in terms of what we're doing in Australia that creates any examples for anywhere else around the world, but it may be useful as you continue your thinking about payments development here in New Zealand to maybe pick up on some of the things that we think we've done well and some of the other things that perhaps in retrospect we might have done differently. I think the first comment I'd make, and it follows pretty much close on from what Ross and Paul said before, and this is one of the participants in a recent workshop we had, and they said people live in the real world, live in real time. It's time that we live in their world too. So that was one of the participants involved in our program. So in reality, we're on a journey, and when we go live about this time next year, that is clearly not the end. It is the beginning. And there's a certain amount of program fatigue. We've got another 12 months to go, but my encouragement to participants and to my board is that we should see when we go live as the start of the journey, and it's going to be an incredibly rich and rewarding journey. But as we move along that journey, we are today building real-time payments in a faster, more connected world. It is data and information-rich payment, and again, Paul spoke about ISO 20022 becoming the global standard, a reality. I was at Cybos this year too, and it's fair to say that it's more and more about how can different geographies work together to ensure the future possibility of global real-time payments. Now, will that happen in the next 5 years? I don't know, possibly 5 to 10. Where the various faster payment systems around the world have the potential to link up such that international payments could be real-time as well. Seamless and secure experience. Paul used the term proxy, we use the term alias. And John Banfield yesterday from BPay would have described to you the aliases that we'll be able to use with our initial convenience service, mobile phone number, email address, or in the case of companies, their Australian business number. So that alias will be a very powerful attribute of what we're building. Operation of a modern economy with 24/7 payments, proliferation of third-party apps and overlay services. Oops. And over time, the demise of cash, which I guess is ultimately in everybody's best interest, certainly from a financial institution's perspective. And finally, we end up with tomorrow with world-leading payment system operating in Australia that encourages innovation and, at the end of the day, makes life better for people. So that's the journey that we've embarked upon. So let me give you a quick idea of what we're actually doing. You will see up the top of that slide there 13 organisations and a number of other organisations that have helped us, but there are 13 shareholding participants in NPP. The major banks, the Reserve Bank, various regional banks and foreign banks, and importantly organisations like ASL, Indu and Cuscal, who act as an aggregator for other organisations. So John, I think it's about 120, 130 organisations that we'll have that will be part of NPP when we go live next year, which is a pretty powerful reach across the Australian financial system. So the first part of our architecture is all about the basic infrastructure. And we called it that deliberately because we wanted to make it basic. We didn't want to build it such that it had such Rolls-Royce characteristics where a good, sustainable people carrier was going to do the job. So it is basic infrastructure. It's involving a network, a switch, an addressing service, and importantly, the interface with the RBA. And the RBA have had to do a lot of work in terms of getting their own internal systems in place, and they've designated a new operating system within the RBA called Fast Settlement Services, FSS. So it's made up of those four elements. It is real-time payments. We're looking at, I think it's about 98% of all transactions clearing and settling in 6 seconds. It's about the richness of the data and the ISO 222 and the power that that creates, particularly for business, of being able to ship information along with the payment. It is about that availability, 24/7 by 365, and very clearly the addressing aspect we see as being an important first item. I won't spend too much time on ICS because John would have run through that yesterday, but I would say that BPay came through an incredibly rigorous tendering process. I think we started out with about 15 possible organisations that could provide our initial convenience service. We got down to 6, then down to 3, and finally BPay emerged as the organisation that came up with the best idea, because what we want to do is create traction with this initial convenience service. It will be the first of many overlays that we see organisations developing now and working their way through post go live next year. And our success or otherwise will be determined by the richness and the quantity of those overlay services. Because at the end of the day, the infrastructure is a set of rails. It's the plumbing. It'll be how powerful those overlay services are in meeting consumer needs, whether that's retail consumers, whether it's SMEs, whether it's corporates, whether it's government. So we're starting to work with organisations to start to build the frameworks in which people can start to consider and develop and build those overlay services. Now, picking up on the point that Paul addressed just in that last session there, why are we doing this? And I think there might be a few myths surrounding NPP, and there may be an argument that if the Reserve Bank of Australia didn't coerce the banks into doing it, it wouldn't happen. I think that's absolute bullshit. It was going to happen. It was going to happen for a number of reasons. One is that consumers are demanding things in real time. It was also going to happen because the market would not let the current financial institutions just go to sleep at the wheel, because there's massive disruptors in the Australian financial system. The Reserve Bank certainly provided the encouragement, and I don't think we'd be where we are today without their support and commitment, but it was a combination of a range of factors, and I'll talk about a number of them here now. I think there are 6 major areas, and I want to work my way through them just one by one. And I don't think any one of them of and by themselves would have been enough catalyst for the creation of NPP. It was the combination of each of those 6 factors that I believe have brought us to where we are today. Again, probably in the last day and a bit, you've heard so much about the change within the whole technical area and the applications that are being brought to bear to the market. We can't ignore them. The pace of change in this space grows ever quicker, And any organisation that figures they can just put their head in the sand and they'll all go away is kidding themselves. The second aspect is just digitisation. Just an fundamentally important element of any developed, or dare I say it, developing economy. The data that comes out in terms of digitisation is just incredible, and again I'd argue the case that we ignore it at our peril. Third element of the reasons why we're doing this and why we're doing it now, our payment channels are everywhere. Payment channels are pervasive. And customers are responding to that in ways that we might not have even thought about over a third bottle of red even a few years ago. The next aspect is just that drive from customers, whether it's retail customers, whether it's SMEs, and talking to people in the UK recently, they argue that one of the ongoing drivers in terms of the development of faster payments in the UK are business. Business are demanding of their financial institutions real-time solutions and the data that would flow with that to improve their own businesses, to get rid of the friction points in their businesses. So whilst the immediate impact of NPP will primarily be on consumers in Australia, retail consumers, we're not underestimating the incredible drive and power that we believe corporates will impose upon their financial institutions to come up with real-time solutions. The whole area of security and fraud obviously is another driver. And with our partners Swift, we're making sure that the robustness and the security and the safeness of our set of rails is paramount in our thinking. And the last one I think speaks for itself, the whole area of fintechs. And Paul again referred to those, as did Ross Dawson this morning. So why are we doing this? We're doing this in response to Australian consumers, Australian business. We're doing it because of market disruption, and we're also doing it with the support and encouragement of the RBA. So where are we in our program? When I was here 2 years ago, we were just getting the last checks in from the 13 participants so that we could contract with Swift to build and operate the system. So I remember going in and out of that room there on any number of occasions, getting the last of the 13 across the line in terms of their financial commitment. So as we've got there, phase 3, it started about 2 years ago when we actually contracted with the Swift organisation to build and operate. We then moved through 2015 where the design and elaborate continued to work. You'll see various things called UCE. With our program management support through KPMG, at various stages, regular stages throughout the program, we've got all of the participants together. It's usually a crowd of a couple of hundred, and we spend a couple of days on meaty issues around the program. The most recent one, which was in September, was all about testing. Testing within the organisation, buddy testing, and then the industry testing that we'll start to move through. So we are now in November 2016. As we move into next year, various milestones along the way, but there is an absolute, unabided, unwavering commitment to go live about this time next year. And I'm asked sometimes, how do I feel about where we are? I'm positive, but I'm nervously positive because I know just how much more challenges there are to get from where we are now to going live. So we are on budget, we're on time, we're on schedule, and there has been, again, an absolute commitment to avoid scope creep. When various people within the various organisations say, we want to do this, we want to do that, the board have said, design change requests are a no-no. Because the worst situation we would end up with is that we're in 2009 and we're still doing it because the scope has expanded. The board has been rock solid saying, no design change requests. I think we've made 2 or 3, but we've probably been offered 40 and we've just said, go away. It's not going to happen. So that's where we are now. I would like to talk about a few extra aspects before I talk about what we've learnt. The first one is, as with any startup company, any organisation, you need a strategy. And in great consulting tradition, we put strategy on a page that the board signed off on and which provides the blueprint for management to start getting into. So, our purpose or mission is to build and operate a fast, versatile and data-rich payment system for Australians and provide a platform for future growth and innovation. And it's that second part that really I think excites certainly me, but also the board. What is our vision? We want to have an economically self-sustaining, but not profit maximising, industry utility infrastructure and a key voice and participant in the broader payments community. So this thing needs to be run commercially, but it's not being run to maximise profit. The organisations are not looking for a return on their investment. What they are looking for is efficiency in terms of the transaction costs and what it would take to run NPP. So it's commercial but not profit maximising. And clearly in any strategy, you need to have key result areas, and our key result areas are built around firstly infrastructure and operations, very critically innovation, thirdly making sure that our stakeholder engagement is front and centre. We want to be a participant in developments, and Victoria will talk to you very soon about the Australian Payments Plan. We want to be part of that conversation. And last but not least, this organisation must stand up and be very clear about its governance principles and be seen to be acting in the best interests of not only the participants, but the broader Australian economy. So we've got our strategy. Up until September, I was the only employee as the independent chair of NPPA, but we are now building executive capability. We now have a CEO, Adrian Loveney, and about half of those positions are now being filled. You will see that it's not an enormous organisation. I think we'll end up with 10 or 11 FTE, and that's in large part because the operation of the infrastructure has been run by the Swift organisation. So it'll be lean, it'll be thin, but it will do what we set out to do in terms of being able to achieve that strategic blueprint that I spoke about on the previous page. In any startup, it's a great opportunity to build a culture, and Adrian and the board believe that the elements of the desired culture for NPP will be about it being open and collaborative, about it being commercial, about it being innovative, and about it being energetic. They're the four cultural values that we see as vital to the ongoing operation of our business. In any major project, and I've been involved in a lot of projects over time, and I'd argue that most bank CEOs wake up in the middle of the night worried about a project of some shape or nature within your organisation. This is a big project, and big projects need excellent project management discipline. So this is the structure that we've established with the assistance of KPMG to make sure that this project comes in the way we want it to. So you'll see various bodies there across various work streams, and I'd argue that any one time, apart from any internal build of the 13 participants, there would probably be somewhere between 150 and 200 involved across those various groups there. So a massive undertaking, not only in terms of financial investment, but just in terms of people commitment. And I think one of the lessons I'll come to later on is that you need to invest the resources in terms of making sure that a project of this size and dimension is properly managed. I want to talk now a little bit about the governance aspect, and one of the lessons that I'll come back to later is that we arrived at governance and the proper governance very early. It had to be a decision made at the very early stage of the project, and then it had to be put in place such that we were making good decisions that were in the interests of not only the participants but the broader Australian good. So the board is made up of myself as the independent chair and the CEO. The major Australian banks, because they are funding a large part of the equation, are entitled to 1 seat each. We have 8 small to medium-sized organisations. They form an electoral college and vote 4 of that 8 to be on the board. So in this case, we have ING, Bendigo and Adelaide, Cuscal and City. And an important final aspect is that the RBA has a board seat, and I think that's been absolutely vital to where we've got to thus far. And if I could share maybe just a quick anecdote with you, I think the first couple of board meetings I chaired, the commercial bankers looked at the RBA as sort of coming from another planet. Central bankers hadn't really had too much interaction with them. And the central bankers might have regarded the commercial bankers as mercenaries. But over 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, we started to develop a relationship where they started to see that they were basically had the same ideas, the same objectives, the same approaches. And apart from any of the other benefit for the project, I just think it's been great in terms of getting a greater degree of understanding of what each of those organisations are really up to. So our constitution as it's currently constructed says that when we go live, the Reserve Bank would come off the board because from a public policy perspective, their objective will have been met. There's some efficient infrastructure being built, tick, the governor can say, job done. I'm of the view, and we've got a paper coming forward to the November board meeting that would say, I think there's a good argument for them to stay on. Because they are a major participant in the game. They are a transaction banker to government departments. They're also providing the fastest settlement service, so they're a major player in the game. And thirdly, I think it's just good to keep the central bank involved. So where that goes from a board perspective, I don't know, but it's certainly I'd be strongly supportive of that continuing on into the future. The final aspect is when we go live, there will be the addition of a second independent director. And we're starting to think about what skills we need on that board that we might look to identify in the market and bring onto the board around the middle of next year. So, what have we learnt? Structure and process. Big project requires strong project management discipline. Take the time. I came on board in September 2013 and I thought late 2017 seemed like a lifetime away. But it goes incredibly quickly. On the other hand, if we said 2019 to be go live, we would have probably got there in 2019. So it's got to be an ambitious date, but not one that's just crazy. Invest the resources. And I'm incredibly admiring of the 13 participants in terms of the level of financial commitment and support they've provided this project. Have the hard conversations early. Funding, governance, who's going to build it, how it's going to operate. Those conversations can't be left too far down the track. Utilise the opportunity. There was opportunity there. There was a willingness on behalf of the Australian finance industry to get together, and they did. Collaborative activity. Ex-President Bill Clinton once said, "We know that people working together will produce better outcomes than geniuses working alone." We know that people working together produces better outcomes than geniuses working alone. So that was ex-President Bill Clinton. Maybe by the end of the day we'll have another President Clinton. One can only hope. Get senior executives on the board. Again, we've been really privileged to have quality of senior executives there that can make decisions. They don't have to go back to their head office and say, can I? They're prepared to make tough calls, and we make them within the boardroom. Now, over the life of the program, I've probably chaired 50 board meetings. We have never gone to vote. We have never had a vote. And that's because the people around that room believe that getting 85% of their ideal outcome is much better than getting 100% of a non-solution. So there's been a preparedness to give up a little to keep the whole thing moving ahead. And last but not least, and I made this point earlier, we focus on the go live as being the beginning, not the end. I can't guarantee to you we're going to get all 13 up to run on day one, but I am very confident we'll have enough of that 13 to make it very productive, and there'll be a lot of traction. So, in summary, We're building this for Australia. We're building it because we believe there's national good in this, but we also believe from a participant point of view there will be benefit to their P&L and their balance sheet. Secondly, we're building it for the whole industry. It has to be open to everybody. It can't be seen as being a closed shop. We've tried to avoid too much complexity by keeping it simple, making sure the infrastructure is basic. We're focusing on the long run. This is not tomorrow's solution. This is a solution for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And the commitment and interest is strong. The 13 are absolutely committed to the go-live date next year. There will be no deviation from that. And I've been amazed at just how well competitors, when the need arises, can collaborate. It's just been an amazing thing to watch it firsthand. So the final point I want to make before I'm happy to take any questions is around a lesson I think that Paul certainly mentioned there. And I had the pleasure about 5 or 6 years ago of being able to visit various parts of Africa. I went to South Africa, I went to Botswana, I went to Zambia. And during that trip I heard something, and I think it's particularly relevant to what we're about with NPP and what you're about here in the Payments New Zealand community. And that is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's what we're doing. I'd encourage you to do the same. Thank you very much.